When Javier landed in Spain, he had exactly 300 euros in his pocket, and one lie, already prepared for his mother. He would call her that night and say, "I'm okay, everything is good here." But nothing was good. Not the room he rented, not the city, that felt too big for him, not the silence, not the fear, and definitely not the version of himself he saw in the mirror. Because 3 days after arriving in a country he had dreamed about for years, Javier sat on the floor of a tiny room, holding his phone in one hand, covering his mouth with the other, and crying so quietly that even the walls wouldn't hear him. This is not a story about arriving in Europe and instantly winning. This is a story about what happens after the airport photos, after the smiles, after the brave social media posts. This is the part nobody posts, the part where starting over doesn't feel inspiring. It feels humiliating. Back home, Javier was not rich, but he was not nobody. He had people who knew his name. He had streets that felt familiar. He had his favorite tea stall, his bus stop, his small routine, his mother's voice from the kitchen in the morning. He had a life, messy, imperfect, limited, but his. Still, for years, he carried the same thought inside him. There has to be something bigger than this. He watched videos about Europe, late at night. He saw clean streets, modern buildings, people speaking different languages, stories about fresh starts and better futures. Spain caught his heart first. Not because it looked easy, because it looked possible. He began imagining a new version of his life. A small room, a hard beginning, a few painful months, then progress, then stability. Then one day, maybe, he would smile and say it had all been worth it. So he worked, saved what he could, sold what he didn't need, borrowed a little, promised everyone he would make it. And the hardest promise of all was the one he made to his mother. "I won't suffer there." She looked at him the way mothers do, when they already know their child is walking toward pain, but also know they cannot stop him. She didn't say much. She just held his face for a moment and told him, "Whatever happens, don't disappear from yourself." He smiled. He thought he understood what she meant. He didn't. Not yet. The first few hours in Spain felt almost unreal. The airport lights, the different accents, the fast movement of people who seemed to know exactly where they were going. For a moment, Javier felt proud. He had made it, not to success, but to the beginning. And beginnings can feel beautiful, until reality starts asking questions. His rented room was smaller than the pictures. Much smaller. The mattress was thin. The window faced another wall. The kitchen was shared with strangers, who barely looked at him. The bathroom smelled like old pipes and cheap soap. But he still told himself, "It's temporary." That became his favorite sentence. When he ate bread for dinner, because he was trying not to spend money, temporary. When he got lost, because he still didn't understand the transport system, temporary. When he opened job websites and saw words he couldn't fully understand, temporary. But by the end of the first week, that word stopped comforting him. Because temporary pain still hurts when you're inside it, especially when you're alone. Nobody warns you properly about the evenings. That's when it gets worst. Daytime can distract you. You can walk, search, try, pretend. But evening tells the truth. That was when Javier would return to his room and hear the silence waiting for him. No mother in the kitchen. No friend calling him downstairs. No familiar noise from the street. No one asking if he had eaten. Just the sound of his own breathing, and sometimes the laughter of other tenants through the wall. He started calling home less, not because he didn't miss them, because he missed them too much. Every call became a performance. Yes, work will come soon. Yes, I'm learning fast. Yes, people are nice. Yes, don't worry. After every call, he would stare at the dark phone screen and feel something inside him sink a little deeper, because the lie was becoming part of his daily routine. And the worst part was that he had started believing that if he admitted he was struggling, it would mean he had failed. So he kept smiling on video calls and crying after them. Javier had imagined struggle. He had not imagined humiliation. He printed resumes with money he could barely spare. He walked from cafe to cafe, restaurant to restaurant, store to store. Some people didn't even take the paper from his hand. Some smiled politely, in the way people do when they already know the answer is no. Others spoke too fast for him to follow. There is a special kind of pain in nodding like you understand when you don't. A special kind of shame in saying sorry 3 times, a special kind of loneliness in being treated like you are invisible because your words are slow. One afternoon, after being rejected again, he sat on a bench and counted his money, then counted it again, then again, as if the number might change if he stared hard enough. It didn't. 300 had become 212, then 180, then less. That night, he looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back. The confidence he had packed with him was disappearing. His face looked older. His eyes looked tired. And for the first time, going home started sounding less like failure and more like relief. That thought terrified him, because he had not crossed countries just to return broken. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. His shoes were wet. His phone battery was almost dead. He had gone to an interview for a low-paying job he didn't even want. And halfway through the conversation, he realized the employer had already made a decision before he sat down. They were looking through him, not at him. By the time he got back to his room, he had nothing left to perform. No optimism. No speech. No brave face. He closed the door, sat on the floor, pulled his knees to his chest, and cried. Not beautifully. Not dramatically. Just the kind of crying that comes when the body gives up trying to stay proud. He cried for the money, for the pressure, for the distance, for the version of himself he thought he would become faster. He cried because the dream and the reality were so far apart that he no longer knew which one was more painful. Then his phone lit up. It was his mother calling. He watched it ring, and ring, and ring. He couldn't answer, because if he heard her voice, the lie would break, and maybe he would too. The next morning, nothing magical happened. No perfect opportunity arrived. No stranger saved him. No inspirational music played in the background. But something small changed. Javier woke up empty. And sometimes, empty is useful, because when you have nothing left to protect, you become honest. For the first time since arriving, he stopped asking, "How do I look successful?" and started asking, "What do I need to survive?" That question changed everything. He stopped chasing jobs that only sounded impressive. He looked for anything honest. Kitchen work, cleaning, stockroom shifts, delivery, night work. He made peace with the fact that dignity is not in the title. It is in endurance. Then he did something even more important. He stopped hiding. He asked other immigrants how they survived their first year. He spoke to people he used to pass quietly. He listened more than he talked. He learned where cheap food was, which neighborhoods were safer, what mistakes to avoid, how to stretch a week out of almost nothing. And slowly, painfully, Spain stopped feeling like a wall. It started feeling like a language he had not learned yet. His first job was not the life he imagined. It was physically exhausting. The pay was low. The hours were bad. But it was movement. And movement matters when your life has been frozen by fear. He came home tired, but differently tired. Before, he had been tired from helplessness. Now, he was tired from building. He began learning the city, learning the rhythm, learning when to speak, when to listen, when to keep going, even while embarrassed. He made mistakes, many. He mispronounced words, missed directions, got laughed at once, trusted the wrong person once, sent money home, even when he should have kept more for himself. But he kept going. Month by month, the panic inside him started changing shape. It didn't disappear. It matured. It became discipline. He wrote down expenses, practiced language phrases before sleep, watched tutorials, took notes, showed up early, stayed humble without collapsing into self-hatred. And one day, months later, something happened that would have seemed small to anyone else, but not to him. Someone spoke to him quickly, and he understood everything. He answered naturally. No freezing, no fake smile, no sorry again, just one normal moment. And in that moment, he realized he was no longer only surviving this place. He was beginning to belong to it. The first real win did not look cinematic. No big celebration, no luxury apartment, no dramatic success montage. It was quieter than that. He sent money home and still had enough left for himself. That had never happened before. He bought groceries without fear. He walked through the city without feeling like an intruder. He laughed at something in a language that once felt impossible. He looked in the mirror and saw tiredness still, but also strength. Not the loud kind, The earned kind, the kind built from nights nobody saw. One Sunday, he finally called his mother and told her the truth. Not all the details, but enough. Enough for his voice to shake, enough for her to go silent for a few seconds. Then she said something he would never forget. "I knew you were suffering." Javier closed his eyes, and for the first time in months, he didn't feel ashamed. He felt seen. She didn't ask why he had lied. She didn't make him explain. She only said, "But listen to me, you are still there. That means you are stronger than the version of you who first arrived." He cried again, but this time, it was different. Not the cry of someone falling apart, the cry of someone realizing he had already survived the worst part. People love the success part of migration stories. The better job, the cleaner clothes, the confident walk, the before and after. But the real transformation doesn't begin when life gets easier. It begins the first time you stop running from the truth. Javier did not become a new man because Europe saved him. He became a new man because pain forced him to meet himself honestly. The weak parts, the scared parts, the ashamed parts, the patient parts, the brave parts, all of it. And in the end, that was the reinvention. Not becoming rich, not becoming impressive, becoming real. He had left home, trying to become bigger. Instead, he became deeper. And maybe that matters more. Because sometimes a new country does not give you a better life immediately. Sometimes it first breaks the old illusion of who you thought you were. Then, piece by piece, it gives you the chance to build someone stronger. So if you are in that stage right now, the lonely stage, the broke stage, the ashamed stage, the stage where you smile on calls and cry in silence, hear this clearly. A painful beginning does not mean you made the wrong decision. It may simply mean your new life has asked you for a price. And some of the strongest people in the world are just people who kept going long enough for the pain to stop being the end of the story. Javier came to Spain with 300 euros. But money was not the smallest thing he arrived with. He also arrived with fragile confidence, borrowed hope, and a version of himself that had never really been tested. Months later, he still did not have everything, but he had something much harder to earn. Proof. Proof that he could survive uncertainty. Proof that he could rebuild identity. Proof that loneliness did not kill him. Proof that reinvention is ugly before it becomes beautiful. And maybe that is what starting over really is. Not one brave decision, but thousands of quiet ones, made after nobody is clapping.